4 astronauts are hurtling through deep space right now, farther from Earth than any human has been in over 50 years. And if one single system fails, there is no rescue mission coming. Hey, I'm FactSpark. If you want complex ideas explained simply, subscribe right now because you're going to want to see what comes next. On April 1st, 2026, NASA launched Artemis 2, sending humans toward the moon for the first time since 1972. But this isn't your grandfather's space mission. This is something far more ambitious and far more dangerous. Let's start with what's actually happening up there. The crew isn't landing on the moon. Instead, the Orion capsule flies close enough to feel the moon's gravity, swings partially around it, and then uses that gravitational pull like a slingshot to redirect back toward Earth. This flight path is called a free return trajectory, and it's one of the smartest safety decisions in the entire mission. Even if the engines fail completely, the physics of the path are already designed to bring the crew home. No fuel needed at that critical point. The moon itself does the work. The rocket that got them there is the most powerful launch vehicle NASA has built in decades. It runs on 4 main engines plus 2 massive solid rocket boosters strapped to the sides, which handle most of the raw force during liftoff. The whole launch sequence happens in stages. The boosters fire first, then separate, and the central core keeps burning until the capsule is on a trajectory toward deep space. Every single one of those stages has to execute with almost zero margin for error. A small deviation early on doesn't just mean a bumpy ride. It could mean the entire mission is compromised before it even reaches the moon. Now, here's something I want you to think about and drop in the comments. If you were one of those 4 astronauts, what would be the hardest part of the mission for you personally? The physical challenge, the isolation, or knowing there's no rescue if something goes wrong? Inside that capsule are 4 highly trained astronauts, each with a defined role. One commands the mission and makes real-time decisions under pressure. One pilots the spacecraft. The other 2 manage the onboard systems. Leading the crew is Commander Reed Wiseman, a veteran naval aviator whose entire background has been built around staying calm when everything is going sideways. In deep space, that quality isn't just useful, it's essential. These astronauts didn't just train hard, they trained for failure. Simulated system breakdowns, microgravity adaptation, psychological preparation for extended isolation, all of it designed for one simple reason. Out there, nobody is coming to help. Every problem has to be solved from inside that capsule. So what are they actually up against? The first major challenge is radiation. Once you leave the protection of Earth's magnetic field, you are exposed to high-energy particles streaming in from the sun and from interstellar space. These particles don't just damage human tissue over time, they can corrupt electronics too. The Orion capsule has improved shielding compared to anything used in the Apollo era, but the risk is still real and it accumulates with every hour spent beyond low Earth orbit. The second challenge is what happens to the human body without gravity. Muscles weaken faster than you'd expect. Bones lose density. Fluids in the body shift toward the head, creating pressure and discomfort. To fight this, the crew follows strict daily exercise routines and constant medical monitoring. This isn't optional maintenance, it's mission critical. A crew that arrives back on Earth physically compromised is a data point that could delay everything that comes after Artemis 2. The third challenge is the psychological weight of deep isolation. The crew will be hundreds of thousands of kilometers from Earth. Communication has a delay. It isn't a live conversation. It's more like leaving a message and waiting. The environment outside is completely silent and completely dark. There's no window to step out of, no fresh air, no break from the confined interior of the capsule. Decisions have to be made independently. That kind of pressure, sustained over 10 days, is something very few people on Earth have ever experienced. Now, systems. One of the primary goals of Artemis 2 is to stress test everything under real conditions. Oxygen generation, water systems, navigation, thermal control inside the cabin, communications at extreme distances, power management, all of it runs continuously for the full duration of the mission with no opportunity to pause and fix something properly. Either it works or it doesn't. The data collected from this mission will tell engineers exactly where the weak points are before they send a crew to actually land on the moon. And then there's the return. Re-entry is the moment that makes even veteran aerospace engineers hold their breath. The Orion capsule hits the upper atmosphere at roughly 39,000 kilometers per hour. At that speed, friction with the atmosphere generates such intense heat that a sheath of plasma forms around the entire capsule. That plasma layer doesn't just look dramatic, it physically blocks radio signals. For several minutes, the crew cannot communicate with Earth, and Earth cannot communicate with them. Everything depends entirely on the heat shield holding. If it doesn't, there is no backup plan. If the heat shield performs as designed, parachutes deploy, The capsule slows, and it splashes down in the ocean for recovery. If everything goes right, the mission ends with 4 astronauts back on Earth and a mountain of data that will shape everything NASA does next. Which brings us to the bigger picture, and this is where things get really interesting. A lot of people compare Artemis 2 to Apollo, and on the surface that makes sense. Humans, a rocket, the moon. But the comparison only goes so far before it breaks down completely. Apollo was born out of a geopolitical race. The United States needed to get to the moon before the Soviet Union, and it needed to do it publicly and undeniably. It was a technological and political statement made at a specific moment in history. Once the goal was achieved, the program wound down. The moon landings were extraordinary, but they were also finite by design. Artemis is something structurally different. The goal isn't to go to the moon and come back. The goal is to establish the conditions for humans to stay, a sustained presence, a foundation. The technology in the Orion capsule reflects 50+ years of advancement, advanced digital systems, far greater automation, significantly improved radiation protection, and redundant safety mechanisms built on decades of hard lessons learned from every mission that came before, including the ones that went wrong. Apollo was a sprint. Artemis is an infrastructure project.
Artemis 3, the mission that follows if Artemis 2 succeeds, is where a crew will actually land on the lunar surface for the first time since 1972. After that, the program looks even further, a potential permanent lunar base, and eventually the technologies and experience needed to reach Mars. What's happening right now in that capsule isn't just a moon mission, it's the opening move in humanity's long-term expansion beyond this planet. But none of that happens if Artemis 2 doesn't work. Every system being tested right now, every piece of data being recorded, every decision the crew makes, it all feeds back into what comes next. If the heat shield holds, if the life support runs cleanly, if the crew comes back healthy and cognitively sharp, NASA gets the green light to keep going. If something fails, even something small, engineers go back to the drawing board before they risk putting people on the surface of the moon. That's why this 10-day mission carries so much weight. It looks like a flyby. It is, in reality, the critical gateway to everything that follows. Right now, 4 human beings are traveling a path no person has traveled in over half a century. They're testing the limits of technology, physiology, and human endurance, not for a headline, but to prove that staying out there is actually possible. The final results won't be immediate. The full data analysis will take weeks once the teams on the ground go through everything recorded during the mission. But the most important result, whether the crew comes home safe, that answer is coming very soon. And when it does, it will tell us whether the next chapter of human space exploration is ready to begin.